Okay, number 11 on section 1.6, we have x cubed plus 7x squared equals 4 times x plus 7. And so first thing we want to do is use the distributive property to distribute that 4 on the right side. So we'll have x cubed plus 7x squared equals 4x plus 28. Now we want to move everything to one side, subtract 4x on both sides, subtract 28 on both sides, so that we have 0 on the right side of the equation. Minus 4x minus 28 equals 0. Now we're going to need to factor the left side of the equation. And to do that, we're going to factor by grouping. We're going to take the first two terms and we're going to factor out an x squared. So we'll have x squared times x plus 7 for those first two terms. Then we can factor out a 4 or a negative 4 on the last two terms. We factor out the negative 4, we'll be left with x plus 7. So now we can factor the left side because both terms have a factor of x plus 7. So if we factor out the x plus 7, we're going to be left with x squared minus 4. This means since these two factors multiply together to give us 0, that means one of them must be 0. So either x plus 7 is 0, which means that x is negative 7, or x squared minus 4 is 0, which means that x squared is 4, and x is plus or minus the square root of 4, which is 2. So our solution set for this problem is going to be negative 7, negative 2, and positive 2. On number 25, we want to first of all get rid of all these fractions. So to do that, we can multiply by the least common multiple of the denominators. So that would be y squared. So we'll multiply the left side by y squared, and we'll multiply the right side by y squared. So when we do that, when we multiply 2 times y squared, we get 2y squared. When we multiply 3 over y by y squared, we're going to have minus 3y. And then on the right side, when we multiply 5 over y squared times y squared, the y squared is canceled, and we end up with 5. Now we move everything to the left side of the equation by subtracting 5 on both sides, setting it all equal to 0. And now we can either factor or use the quadratic formula. Since this is a quadratic, I think this is pretty easy to factor, so that's what I'm going to do. Since 2 is prime, there's only one way to write the first term, 2y times y, and then the last two numbers have to multiply together to give me negative 5 and cause this whole thing to add up to negative 3. And so if I put the 5 here and the 1 here, and I make this negative and this positive, that's going to give me a positive 2y minus 5y for my middle term, and that gives me negative 3y, so that works. Since these two factors multiply together give me 0, that means that 2y minus 5 is 0, or y plus 1 is 0. So this would be 2y equals 5, divide by 2, and y is 5 halves. Over here, subtract 1, and you get y equals negative 1. So the solution set for this is going to be 5 halves and negative 1. Jean runs 6 miles and then rides 24 miles on her bicycle in a biathlon. She rides 8 miles per hour faster than she runs. If the total time for her to complete the race is 2.25 hours, determine her average speed running and her average speed riding her bicycle. So since this is a uniform motion problem, we know that we have rate times time equals distance. And our two situations here are that she runs and she bikes. So first of all, we know that she runs 6 miles, so that's her running distance. She rides 24 miles, so that is her biking distance. She rides 8 miles per hour faster than she runs, so if her running rate is r, then her biking rate is going to be 8 more than that. And then we know that her total time to complete the race is 2.25 hours. So one way we could do this would, for her time here, we can since rate times time equals distance, that means that time is equal to distance over rate. If we divide both sides of that equation by r. So for her time here, I can just write distance over rate. So this would be 6 over r. And for biking, it would be 24 over r plus 8. And we know that if we add those two times together, we're going to get 2.25. So we'll have 6 over r plus 24 over r plus 8 is equal to 2.25. So what we can do here is we can get a common denominator on the left side, which would be r times r plus 8. So we'd have to multiply this first fraction by r plus 8 over r plus 8. And we need to multiply the second fraction by r over r. So if we do that, for the first one, we're going to get 6r plus 48. And that's going to be over r times r plus 8. And then for the second one, we're going to have 24r over r times r plus 8. All right, and that's going to equal 2.25. If we write the left side as just one fraction altogether, since now we have a common denominator, that's going to be 30r plus 48 over r times r plus 8 equals 2.25, which we could write 2.25 over 1. And now I'm going to cross multiply. So 2.25 times r plus 8 equals 30r plus 48. Now I am going to use the distributive property on the left side to get 2.25 r squared plus, if I multiply 2.25 times 8, I get 18, so that's going to be 18r when I multiply 2.25r times 8, and then on the right side, 30r plus 48. Now I'm going to get everything on one side, 2.25r squared plus, subtract 30r on both sides, so that's going to be actually minus 12r minus 48 equals 0. So what we want to do here is just use the quadratic formula. So that is going to be negative b, which would be positive 12, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so when I punch that what's under the radical into my calculator, I'll get negative 12 squared, which is 144, minus 4 times 2.25 times negative 48. And I'll take the square root of that, and that's going to be 24. So this is actually, I can rewrite it as 12 plus or minus 24 over 4.5. And 12 plus 24 over 4.5 is going to be 36 over 4.5, and that is 8. R is going to be 8 miles per hour for her running rate, and R plus 8 for her biking rate is going to be 16 miles per hour. So her average speed running is 8 miles per hour, and her average speed biking is 16 miles per hour. The reason I didn't do 12 minus 24 over 4.5 is because that would be a negative number, and you can't have a negative rate. All right, number 87. First thing we're going to do is multiply this whole thing through by the common denominator of everything on the left. Multiply both sides by that. Of course, the right side will be 0 no matter what you multiply it by. But if I multiply this whole side by a squared, I'm going to, for the first term, the a squared will cancel and I'll have negative 2. For the second term, a squared times 4 over a is just 4a. And then a squared times 1 is a squared. And that all equals 0. I'm going to rearrange the left side in order of the powers of a. And I will get this. I will use the quadratic formula to solve. So negative b, so negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So 4 squared is 16 minus 4, a is 1, c is negative 2, and all over 2a, which is just 2. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 8, which is 24, all over 2. So that's going to give me negative 2. The negative 4 over 2 is 2, plus or minus, and the square root of 24, 4 goes into that. That's going to be 2 square root of 6 over 2, and the 2's cancel. So I will just end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 6. So for this one, I noticed that this is in the form of a quadratic. And so instead of having to work with those rational exponents, I am just going to change this. I'm going to say that u is c to the 1/5 power. And that way, instead of having to write c to the 2/5, I can call that u squared, because u squared would be c to the 1/5 squared, which is c to the 2/5. So I'm renaming c to the 1/5 so that it is an easier problem to solve. So this is going to be 5u squared. This will be 11u. And this will just be 2. And now I can solve this quadratic just normally. I could probably factor it. Let's see. So we'd have 5u and u, and then 2 times 1. So we can put 2 and the 1 there and make them both subtraction. So that's going to be 10u minus 1u is negative 11u. So negative 10u minus 1u is negative 11u, and then a positive 2. So that works. And then since these two factors multiply together give me 0, one of them must be 0. So 5u minus 1 could be 0, in which case we would have 5u equals 1. So u would be 1/5. Or we could say u minus 2 equals 0. So that would mean u equals 2. Now, we don't want to know what u is. We want to know what c is. So I have to go back now and substitute back in so I can find out what c is. U is equal to c to the 1/5. So now, since u is 1/5, and this on this side, I can say 1/5 equals c to the 1/5 power, and therefore, if I raise both sides to the 5th power, I'm going to raise both sides to the 5th power. So I'm going to have 1/5 to the 5th power is equal to c. For this one, u is 2, so I'll have 2 equals c to the 1/5. I'll raise both sides to the 5th power, and I'll get 2 to the 5th is equal to c. C is equal to 32. And of course, we'd want to go ahead and write c over here as 1 over 5 to the 5th, and 5 to the 5th is 3,125. If I can find my pen. 3,125. So the way I would write that solution set, if I hadn't taken up all my room, let's see, I can put it over here. I would write 32 and 1 over 3,125. Okay, 127 says if an object is dropped from a height of h meters, the velocity v in meters per second at impact is given by v equals the square root of 2gh, where g is 9.8 meters per second squared. That's the acceleration due to gravity. So part A, we want to determine the impact velocity for an object dropped from a height of 10 meters. All right, so we are looking for the velocity, and they gave us the formula for that. Square root of 2 times g, which is 9.8, and then h, which is the height from which you drop the object. So that's 10. So that's going to be the square root of 20 times 9.8 is square root of 196. And that is 14. So that's going to be 14 meters per second. So for part B, it says determine the height required for an object to have an impact velocity of 26.8 meters per second. So this time they gave us the velocity. So we'll put that into the formula, 26.8 for V. And under the square root, we've got 2 times g, which is still 9.8. And we're trying to find out what height would give us that impact velocity. So h is what we don't know. So we're going to have to square both sides of the equation so we can get h out of there. So we will do 26.8 squared, which is 718.24. And so that will equal 2 times 9.8 times h. We will divide both sides by 2.2 times 9.8 to get h by itself. And when we do that, we punch that into our calculator, 718.24 divided by 2 times 9.8. And we want to round to the nearest tenth of a meter. So h is going to be about 36.6 meters.